It's alive. Oh, it's alive. It's alive. It's alive. It's alive. Oh, in the name of God. Now I know what it feels like to be God.
Hello, friends and fiends. Welcome back to Blood and Guts HHN. And we got a good creature feature for you tonight. With me, as always, is this cat right over here, Matt. How's it going, Matt?
I'm doing fantastic, Evil Adam. How about yourself?
Yeah, not too bad, because we're going to discuss a really good one tonight. We got 1978's Dawn of the Dead. George A. Romero classic. One of my favorites. I think it's one of your personal favorites as well.
Absolutely. Like I said, you can't get much better than the legendary George Romero and like his fantastic zombie films.
Yep, and this one is right up there. It's steeped in nostalgia, just like a good cup of tea.
Oh, absolutely.
It's steeped in nostalgia. It's got some great special effects makeup by the legend Tom Savini.
Mm-hmm.
It's got some great music by the band Goblin.
Yep.
It's a classic. It was, Dario Argento
Mm-hmm.
helped him, develop this, and they were kind of going back and forth at the time, to kind of evolve into what you got now is, a couple of survivors held up at a mall.
Mm-hmm. And that's like you sit there thinking about. I know like kids today won't really understand how important the mall was as it was like
the
when
mall,
we were
the
growing
mall
up.
culture.
But like as a kid, like even before I saw this movie, I'd always sit to myself, what would it be like just to live in here for days and just have my run of the stores and go do whatever I want whenever I want to.
Yeah.
This movie really like you can kind of see that play out.
Yeah.
And how that would be. And so like when they first come to the mall and they're clearing out all the zombies and they actually can breathe easy for a little bit and they feel like they can have some semblance of normalcy. You see them like going through. They have the meat markets where they can grill whatever steak they want,
the stores,
or hamburgers.
The clothing stores would put on the fine clothes, and
Yeah.
and we got lucky because we didn't obviously get to experience the malls of the '70s,
Right.
but when we were growing up, the malls of the '80s still had that touch
Yes.
of the '70s. So we actually grew up, in the mall culture of the '80s,
Early
the '90s,
yeah.
and then in high school, of course,
Yep.
the 2000s. So we got that touch of the mall culture. This one was shot at the Monroeville Mall from the winter of '77 to '78, and that was in Monroeville,
Pennsylvania.
PA. Yeah.
Yep.
So, during Christmas season, and what a great touch of nostalgia it is.
And you think about, like I said, them filming it, they'd have to film everything at night and have everything cleaned up and ready.
And break down,
break
it all
down.
down.
So whenever the customers come that morning, didn't know that they were having like blood and guts thrown everywhere every night.
Yep.
But George Romero, like I said, he's just a.
I love Romero, and I love the way his mind works, and you watch these when you're young, like we did, and then you go back and watch them later on, and you can kind of see the way that Romero's mind would work, and it's a beautiful thing.
What I love about it is like that man. He can take like this movie cost $640,000. So I mean, still a decent amount for a horror movie back in the mid to late '70s.
Yep.
But he would make you think he had like the budget of what Spielberg had with Jaws. And they're just like
it's
the Savini, like you talking about how with the zombie makeup, it didn't turn out exactly the way he wanted it. I know he wanted to be like a little bit more of a gray, and it turned out to be more of a blue. So
it's more of a blue.
But it makes it over the top, especially when you have the blood come out and it's like a neon blood color.
Yeah, and it adds to that, and then comic book feel.
Right, exactly.
That just really brings it home, and you have these great characters. You got David Emge as Stephen.
Mm-hmm.
Scott Renninger as Roger. And you got the legendary Ken Foray
Love him.
as Peter, and Galen Ross as Francine. And harkening back to that final girl. All your horror films, the early. Now a lot of stuff is derivative of that final girl.
Right.
Well, you got Galen Ross as Francine. You think about Ellen Ripley.
Yep.
You think about several of your good. Jamie Lee Curtis
Yep.
You know, your good final girls. You know, she's
Yep.
also one of them lesser known final girls because she refused to scream
Right.
and you know, she was like, I want to battle the zombies the same way that the men folk do.
Mm-hmm.
And
Be that strong female character.
And sure enough, she brought it.
Mm-hmm.
She brought it. So
Now, like I said, you hit the nail on the head. I thought she'd done a fantastic job as Francine. Like it was just wonderfully cast. They all have a camaraderie throughout the movie, and from everything you hear about behind the scenes, they got along really well on set too, and it shows in the camera. Because I really think of Ken Foray and Scott Ranger, who played like Roger and Peter. Like I said, throughout the movie, you really can see like their bond as they go through, and then you can see how much it kills Peter when Roger gets bitten.
Oh yeah, and that whole scene with the the iconic scene with the blanket that just kind of slides down the face, and man, and that music by Goblin, for more of the more I'm not going to say lighthearted scenes, but when they're moving the trucks and that intro with the heavy bass with the boom boom dun 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 dun, you know, just kind of drives it home. It's just and I remember watching this at a young age and wondering, like, the music got me because I've always been into music. You've always been into music, but when I first watched it, it was a combination. It was a 1-2 punch of effects, makeup, acting, the music, direction, and I was like, man, this is damn great, you know. And you know, you got zombies in there as well. So.
Well, I mean, that's one thing Romero's always been good. Like going back to him for a little bit, like in his scripts, he has a great way of using those zombies to kind of bring you back to where the state of the world was in. So, in like this movie, he wanted you to think about how we're just like mindless zombies. We go to the mall,
consumerism,
shop, consume. Exactly. We're not thinking about what we're doing. It's just like, you know, consume, buy, spend. Here in the mall, just wandering around aimlessly, which, like, you know, makes me think of the mall rats. You got no agenda.
One of my favorite scenes in the whole film is when they're giving each other a handshake, and they're holding up the stack of the money, the bank camera.
Right. Knowing nobody cares.
Knowing that currency probably doesn't matter at this point, but they've got like a couple thousand or whatever, and they're just kind of, hey, here it is. Here's the money. What a great scene that is.
Yeah, and like we already touched on Tom Savini. I thought he done a great. He does a double duty in this movie because
He's
he plays
doing
the
stunts as well as makeup.
Yeah, plays the biker guy Blades, and like I said, just does a fantastic job in it. And I always, in my head, I know they're probably not thinking like, you know, like that, but I always think about how even though he dies in this movie, I'm like, that must be his brother and From Dusk Till Dawn.
Yeah, it's like a carryover cameo.
Right.
And then you got the David Emge when he turns into the zombie.
Oh, he's got his head.
He's got his head tilted, and he's got he takes one foot and he kind of turns one foot inwards.
Yeah.
And you know, upon doing research, you know, of course, watching documentaries about it and stuff like that, you find out that he's basing his zombie mannerisms off of the Mummy, the way that Boris Karloff would do his deal. You know, walking with that kind of like you got one arm here, one arm here. And you're kind of walking, you're kind of staggering.
Right.
And you can pick that up later on. You go, that makes perfect sense. Look at the way he's moving around.
I always loved how that was shot, too. Like I said, when they first introduced him as a zombie, the elevator doors open. He's got the funny-looking face and stuff. So, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's a fantastic job. So, let me ask you a question then.
Yep.
With all the special effects and all the good stuff, like the good and bad, like I said, because I know Tom Savini wasn't really particularly happy with how the zombie flesh color turned out. What was your favorite zombie kill, whether it's the death of a zombie or them killing someone? What was your favorite in this movie?
That's a damn good question. You know, the helicopter blades, or the scene at the beginning of the tenement when they're executing them. You know, the blowback is really great. The blood pressure cuff is probably one of my favorites through the whole film, because this guy goes back knowing that they're closing in on him.
Right.
And he still wants to take his blood pressure. And that arm comes off. So that's probably my favorite. That's probably my favorite one. But it's hard to say which one is exactly my favorite because there's so many iconic kills.
Yeah. I know mine like I won't really say is my favorite, but definitely stuck with me because, like I said, I was probably about in 8th grade when I first. It was either 6th or 8th grade. I can't remember which because my brother is 2 years older than me. So either he was in 8th grade and I was in 6th, or vice versa.
Right.
And but like whenever they actually split the dude's stomach and you see the intestines and they start digging in on that, like I was just shocked. And like I know George Romero had a battle with the MPAA. He wanted to release his R, but they wanted to give him the dreaded X rating, and basically comparing it to pornography, even though there's no sex in the movie. So George is like, fine, I'm done fooling with you. We're going to release it unrated, but we're going to make sure when we marketed it that there's no graphic sex, there's no sex at all in this movie.
Right.
It's just blood and guts, but you have to be over 17 to come watch this movie.
Blood and guts. Oh, he said the name. He said the name. He said.
And it paid off because worldwide, the movie, like I said, we talked about earlier, had a $640,000 budget, made over $66 million worldwide. So you're talking about 100% return and some on your movie. So George did a great job sticking to his guns because he could keep his vision that way.
Well, what gets me too is the humanity of the film when you look at it, and I've seen it many different ways.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen it. I've watched it during the day. I've watched it during the night. I've watched it when I was drinking. I've watched it when I was sober. You know, and like there's so much humanity. Like when the coat gets stuck in the door, the zombie coat stuck in the door, and just that little opening and closing of the door so that it can get free.
Mm.
You know, things like that, and it's almost silently like it's bit of humanity. Like, where are we?
Well, like you touched on humanity because that reminds me back to earlier in the movie where Peter is where they're getting gas for the chopper and he hears something in that closet doors, and he's got his gun up, thinking when he opens up it's going to be an adult zombie. But it's those two kid zombies.
Two kids.
And, like you could tell that just bothers him that he's going to have to, like, even though they're zombies, that they were kids. They they had their whole lives ahead of them. Like you're talking about the humanity, you could see the humanity in Peter's eyes.
And it's really the fear that he didn't realize. They didn't tell him.
Right.
They didn't tell him in hindsight that it was going to be two children. So when the children came out,
yeah, that's right. Whenever they're filming it,
when they were filming it, they didn't tell him it was going to be children. So when the children came out, that look that you see of, oh, I got to execute. He, you know,
right.
He's already made that decision. But it's, what a great piece of work this is.
Now another question I got for you is there are multiple cuts of this movie. I know the part. I know there's the theatrical. They've got a director's cut. There's the international cut. How many have you been blessed to watch?
I have the special edition DVD with all the special features, and I might have seen one more. So I don't know how many that would be, like maybe 2, 3.
Yeah, I know I have not seen the director's cut. I've seen the international cut before, and it's like subtle differences, not a whole lot, but like I know, like you're talking about, I'm glad you said you got the special edition DVD because this is a movie where it is just extremely hard to find now. You can't find it anywhere streaming. So it's one of those physical media trumps all. So if you really want Five Fans, you're going to have to open up your checkbook to either go to Amazon or eBay to find you a copy because I know it's not so much as a rights issue as whoever owns the rights now is one of the producers, and he's been chomping at the bit to try to release this in 3D, and I can't remember if he's been successful in it yet or not. And
this is a question for you: is I know you're big into these things, but have they done a Scream Factory or a box, a steel box, or anything? Do you know that?
No, not lately because the producer owns the rights now. Like I said, he's been really pushing for like a 3D re-release, and like
so
I can't remember if they had a small release or not. But when I was reading the article, said that's what's holding. That's why you haven't seen a physical media release in quite some time for this movie.
Because you will see Day of the Dead.
Yeah, lots of Day of the Dead. Yeah,
and that's awesome too. We'll get to that later on down the road when we cover more Romero. But yeah, I don't think I've ever seen a steelbook or whatever you call it, Shout Factory, Scream Factory version of this one.
I'm sure there's a few more releases, but I know the one I've got has got like the international version and the regular. But then they did have a box set which had like multiple cuts and had like some other cool like stuff for the fans in there that you got with it, kind of like how you used to see the box sets back in the early 2000s where they really put a lot of effort into it. But no, I wish Scream would get their hands on it because like I know they do a fantastic job with it.
That would be good. That would be a steelbook, or something like that. But yeah, just I mean, and you got the tension. I love the scene one of my favorite scenes is when they're moving the trucks trying to block
Yeah.
the door, and you got the comedic back and forth
Yep.
between them, and then Roger has
Gets
his
careless.
gets careless, and they that whole thing happens.
And I love though after he does get bit, they still are having fun. They're wheeling him around in a wheelbarrow throughout the mall.
Yeah, they're wheeling around, and they're all putting on the suits and the tie and the fancy clothes, fur coats and stuff.
Right.
And I love it because, at their meal they have candles.
Mm-hmm. Like I said, trying to make everything as normal as it can be.
Yeah, not even normal, but maybe they're even living a life that they couldn't have previously lived on their paychecks as their career, because they're eating high society. They're eating steaks. They got candles. They got all the nice cutlery out there. They're the wine. They're like testing the wine. But yeah, that's kind of goes back to that, harkens to that humanity of you can kind of almost see them losing their minds a little bit.
I kind of like talking about the humanity. I love because we haven't brought this up yet, and it has to be said. I love it when Peter and Flyboy are talking, and he brings up that iconic line of why he thinks there's zombies walking the earth. Mm-hmm. And what's that line, Evil Adam?
When there's no more room in hell, the Karens will take to the internet. No, that's not it. That's not it. The dead will walk the earth.
Exactly. That's a fantastic line. It's iconic.
Yeah, and he talks about, what does he say? I'm going to mess up the quote if I try to do it verbatim, but it's something about, his grandfather was a voodoo priest in Trinidad, and he used to say, when there's no more room in hell. And I love that because it's kind of eerie, it's quiet, and they're all wearing the nice, fine clothes.
Yes.
And they've raided the gun shop, so they got the good guns and all the whatnot. And they're standing at the balcony looking down. Mm-hmm. And you got the other great iconic line is, what are they? They're us.
Yeah.
They're us.
And that just goes back
Why
to...
do they come back here?
It's what they knew.
It's what they knew. It's what they remember. And it's these kind of things it's these lines and these scenes that are Romero.
Yeah.
This is Romero. This is Romero, and he's given his actors room to roam, and just kind of like deliver this line, but deliver it. Put a little spooky onto it.
Right.
So they
add your own flavor to it.
Exactly.
One last thing then before we start winding down is the end of the movie. We know when they're making their escape in the helicopter, they have basically no fuel.
Yep.
But Romero wanted to kind of leave it ambiguous as to where do you think they got away,
or do you think different? Yeah.
Or do you think they crashed and there's no more Peter and no more,
or they've even died before they can make it to the chopper.
No
before they can make it to the chopper,
Well, they get in the chopper because they're flying away, but like you said,
Right.
they're not going to last because they got no fuel. So like me personally, I think they crash land, and that's probably about it.
Well, I had read there was another ambiguous ending where, Peter Ken Foray.
Yeah.
And there was something that had happened where he ends up taking his own life at the end.
Yeah. Well, that's why he's sitting there thinking about that.
Yeah.
So.
And so there's all these what ifs, and this is long before you got your Marvel what ifs and all that kind of universe. But I love that, and I do like the ending of the film. Mm-hmm. I like the whole film.
Oh, I love the film.
It's probably my favorite Romero zombie film. Second would be Day, but for me personally, I believe Dawn is, and it's different. Whatever you got
really
is.
It really depends on my mood, to be quite honest with you, because I love them both. Like you said, now if I'm in the mood for that good slow burn, it's definitely Dawn.
Yeah.
But if I want just a little bit more action to it, I love Bub and I love Day of the Dead, like you said. So it really depends on my mood. I'll flip flop back and forth on it. But like I said, you can't go wrong with either one of them. And like I said, even Night of the Living Dead is fantastic.
Yeah, Night of the Living Dead is great. I even enjoy the Savini remake. The remake. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But as far as this one goes, it's got everything you want.
Yeah. The only thing, and honestly, this is not even picking nits, it's just sad how the generation is. Like, people are discovering this movie now. We're talking about how they don't have that, emotional ties to the mall like previous generations do. So for that sense, it may be a little dated to where they may not could get into
Yeah,
it.
if all you know is ordering from Amazon
Yeah.
and going to Walmart and big box stores like that, you're going to look at this and you're going to go, "Whoa, what's this mall?"
Right.
You know, I mean, you're not going to have that same nostalgia. But man, what I mean, you got comedy, you got action, like the whole first montage with the tenement
Yep.
and
It's
the
awesome,
danger. I mean, you really feel the danger when they're in the tenement.
You see him rip that chunk of flesh out of that girl's
Oh
neck.
yeah,
Just
and they're
fantastic.
kicking indoors, and they don't know who's going to be a zombie, who's not.
Yeah.
And they're in the tenement. It's real danger, and then they kind of get in the mall. They have a little bit of a breather, you know, kind of thing, and then they kind of slowly lose their minds as they're setting this whole thing up. But it's got everything: comedy. It's got action, danger. It's got your violence. It's got your good makeup by Savini. I mean, you can't really go wrong with this one.
So it's 5 Goldblums for sure.
That would be on our ranking. We love Jeff Goldblum, so we will often rank things on Goldblum scale. So this one I give it 5 Goldblums.
Oh, easily 5
5
Goldblums.
Goldblums for you.
And like I know like a lot of people don't put a lot of faith in Rotten Tomatoes, but this movie here is like it's well above 90%. Like for a horror movie, it's about near Citizen Kane for a horror movie. It's like
I mean,
well
and
done.
for good reason, because you have dialogue that's written by Romero that's meant to cut you. I mean, but then you have scenes where silly scenes where he's like sliding down the escalator.
Yeah, Roger doing that.
Yeah, and stuff like that. And you have those silly scenes, but you also have these. And, for Ken Foray and for Scott Renninger to really. I watch this and I think, man, these two dudes are best friends.
Yeah.
And to be that they're actors. And I don't know if had they met before this. I don't really know the ins and outs and details of how much they knew each other before this film.
Right.
But I watched this film and I'm like, man, these two dudes are like us. They're best friends.
Well, that's why I said
They're best
because the whole
friends.
cast together, like the camaraderie they all have, is fantastic.
Yeah.
So, Brendan, to close, Fright fans, let us know how you feel about Dawn of the Dead. Is it one of your favorite zombie movies of all time? Do you think it's overrated? Let us know in the comments. If it's overrated, please let us know why, because I would be curious
Yeah.
as to why.
Oh, yeah. And you got that good remake as well. We're
Yeah,
not going
I
to
enjoyed
discount
it.
that. We'll get that down the road as well. That remake is pretty damn good as well. And if you like that music, go ahead and look up Goblin.
Yeah.
Because I was actually listening to them earlier on Spotify, and those tracks, I was like, still just as good as.
Oh, you can listen to it without the movie, because especially if you want an eerie feeling.
Yeah,
to
yeah.
your-
Eerie feeling. You can listen to it all the way through, and you're like, oh, there's the scene where they're driving the trucks. So, yeah. And as always, remember, friends and fiends, blood and guts.